This program contains coarse language.
And the winner is Tina Arena.
I would like to thank, once again, Sony Music, Dennis Hanlon.
To my wonderful record company, Dennis Hanlon for Sony Music when I was 15 years old.
I have to thank my team at Sony Music, led by, of course, Dennis Hanlon.
The aria goes to Jessica Malroy.
To Dennis Hanlon, thank you for letting me be me.
He is known as one of the most powerful men in the music industry.
Dennis Hanlon and my incredible team at Sony, I wouldn't have a career without you.
I think a lot of people feel fear when they hear that name.
It's the music industry's worst kept secret, a company ruled by fear and intimidation. This is the inside story of Sony Music Australia under the reign of its longtime CEO, Dennis Hanlon.
The legend of Dennis has lived on for a long time and everybody is aware of it. This is not a secret.
You seem reluctant to say Dennis Hanlon's name. Is there...
Can I just have a moment? Sorry.
It's always been a massive story that has been waiting to come out. And it could never come out while Dennis was still at the helm because people were so scared.
There was a sense that he was untouchable.
Allegations of systemic bullying.
I felt targeted, I felt manipulated, and I certainly felt abused. So, yeah, there's only so much you can put up with.
A culture where discrimination and sexual misconduct were allowed to thrive.
I was sexually harassed when I worked at Sony. I've had friends sexually assaulted. It's just the norm.
For the first time, these are the voices Sony Music tried to silence.
I used to say that the kindest thing I could say about Dennis was that he was sort of an equal opportunity abuser. You know, he was as mean to men as he was to women.
The neglect of corporate governance on this issue is staggering. It's disgusting how they've supported one human being, setting aside everybody else in the company.
I couldn't go to my grave, in all honesty, without telling the story.
Tonight on Four Corners, we investigate decades of abuse and misconduct at Sony Music Australia, one of the country's largest record labels. We expose the toxic regime of its infamous former CEO, Dennis Hanlon, and how the company's global head office failed to protect its Australian staff for almost 40 years. At annual awards ceremonies around the world, Sony Music's success is on show.
Lots of high-selling artists, high-profile artists, basically all the household names.
Congratulations, Tina!
In Australia, the company has launched and fostered some of our biggest acts. But the man behind these record deals was even more formidable than the stars themselves.
He was a machine, a complete phenomenon, because I don't think anywhere else in the world you'd have a CEO of a music company with that much power, but somehow he built it.
As Sony's chief executive of 37 years, chairman of the ARIA board, and an officer of the Order of Australia, Dennis Hanlon dominated the music business. Until 4 months ago.
One of Australian music's most powerful men has been unceremoniously ousted today.
I was stunned, actually. I thought he had operated with such impunity for so long. I just couldn't believe that it had actually happened.
His sacking came as a bombshell, but the global music juggernaut had known of his behaviour for decades and failed to stop him.
I think the thing that has upset most of us was that New York said, oh, we've just found out about this problem. This has just come to light. And we know that there's such a load of hogwash. That myth has to be challenged.
For them to just say, oh, we found out about it a month ago or 2 months ago, it's just implausible. And it's embarrassing and it's insulting to everyone that's worked there and copped this abuse for all those years. The neglect of corporate governance on this issue from New York is staggering. Staggering.
It was the 1970s, an era of disco and rock and roll, when Dennis Handlin began his career with Sony Music in the mailroom. His ambition was unstoppable, and he quickly worked his way up into management.
He was a personality for sure, because he was alive and unpredictable. In fact, his mantra was, you can sleep when you're dead.
Kathy Hannon worked with Dennis Handlin in 1979 when the company was still CBS Records and he was the national promotions manager.
When I first met him, I thought he was just overly enthusiastic. But after a while, I realised that he would do anything at any cost to get his product onto the top 100 charts. And he was quite erratic and unpredictable in his commands and his demands of staff.
Kathy loved the music business but was appalled by the demands of Handlin. She recalls an occasion where he hired a model for a topless promotion at a local radio station.
She was to flash her chest with "I Want You to Want Me," the Cheap Trick single, written in lipstick on her chest.
When the model didn't turn up, Handlin told Kathy she had to do it.
I was totally shocked, and there's absolutely no way I would do that. I mean, for goodness sake, trying to keep credibility in that industry. So I refused. I was later called back and told by Dennis to come into the office, and he banged on the desk and said, "You don't know how to do your job. I want your resignation in the morning." So I went home crying, and in 1979 there was no recourse. So I wrote up my resignation, delivered it the next day, and I left the next day.
Dennis was very volatile, I remember that, and sort of being a bit shocked by kind of how intense he was. And in both ways, when he was happy, it was, the whole office was, fun and games. And when he was not, it was like, whoa, he's on the rampage, and everybody wanted to get out of the way.
As a secretary working under Handlin in 1985, Eleanor McKay says he had an aggressive win-at-all-costs mentality.
He was hyper-competitive. He liked to win. He didn't brook any opposition. He was definitely of the, if you weren't for him, you were against him. That was it, and I remember, I don't know if I can swear, but I remember in the sales meetings, he'd get everyone to chant, fuck EMI, fuck Warners, So it wasn't enough to go, we're great, we're the best. It's like everybody else is shit, and that was kind of his approach.
Handlin was a big drinker who liked to be the life of the party, and he expected his team to follow his lead.
CBS, rock and roll heaven.
Because I'm sick of working to way past 11.
He was proud of his ruthless management style.
Budget's flowing. What you gonna do when the next man comes?
In a staff video obtained by Four Corners, Handlin is seen dressed up as Hitler
We all sleep better when we fuck him up.
in a parody of a Mel Brooks song.
Grab a chick.
I think in an industry that tolerates
Grab a beer.
bad behaviour, he was a star performer.
Said to myself, let's get the fuck out of here.
So it kind of says something about it. When you actually shock people in music, you're behaving pretty badly.
Alan Terry was Dennis Handlin's 2IC. He's never before broken ranks with Sony Music.
To me, not to have done this interview would have been unconscionable, knowing what I know.
It's a big statement.
I couldn't go to my grave, in all honesty, without telling the story.
As the chief financial officer throughout the 80s and most of the 90s, Alan worked more closely with Handlin than just about anyone else in the company.
Initially, I thought we had a really, really good working relationship, and we went on so many overseas trips together, business trips together. A lot of them were very enjoyable, a lot of them were very rewarding. But his abuses later on became more and more hurtful.
What were the first signs of trouble?
Well, very early on, Dennis called me into his office one morning and said, "Alan, the receptionist now reports to you directly." I said, "Fine, okay." He said, "Now I want you to fire her." I said, "She's been a receptionist for 10 years. He said, no, I want a younger, more attractive, sexy-looking person at the front desk to be the initial contact of the company." So that receptionist, after 10 years service, was fired.
For Alan, it was a disturbing insight into Handlin's obsession with control.
Dennis got consumed by power, no question about it. It was his company, it was his train set, and anyone below him, including myself, as 2IC, were basically puppets. And he pulled all the strings, and he demanded his actions to be followed, and we, like puppeteers, were just pulled from side to side.
Under Handlin's regime, Alan Terry says he and other executives were singled out and humiliated.
His day-to-day dealings with people were pretty much at the executive level. So they're the people who really copped the abuse and the toxic behaviour. Occasionally he would bring some lower minion into a board meeting and absolutely destroy them in front of his superior. But it was meted out to everybody, nobody escaped.
The thing that really struck me was he would sort of do really demeaning things. I remember, there was one incident where he dropped all the papers from his briefcase and he made my boss, get down and pick up all the papers. And it wasn't just that they offered to do it, like he told them, pick that up. I used to say that the kindest thing I could say about Dennis was that he was sort of an equal opportunity abuser. He was as mean to men as he was to women.
He was extremely controlling, manipulative, and had a management philosophy that if it wasn't broken, break it.
Greg Lockhart was the keeper of secrets at Sony for 14 years. As the head of human resources from 1987, it was his job to clean up and cover up Dennis Handlin's abuses.
I'd come into work of a day and there would be someone every day that I would have to put back together again from some drama that Dennis had created the night before or the day before that was very traumatised. And putting people back together again became a full-time job for me.
Meet head of Sony Music Australia, Dennis Handlin. Dennis runs the Australian operations of this huge multinational corporation.
In the public eye, Dennis Handlin was a self-promotion machine.
Dennis must try and sell as many albums as possible.
The greatest self-satisfaction that I get out of the business, to be totally frank, is I'm an Australian person running an Australian company here
He was an expert at creating an image for himself. The amount of profile that he had was phenomenal for such a small company. I mean, it was breathtaking, and it didn't matter how much it cost the company to get that image for him.
By the late 90s, Handlen was CEO and now chairman of one of Australia's most successful record labels. He schmoozed with the world's biggest pop stars, pushing their albums to the top of the charts and smashing sales. The company appeared to be a shining success under Dennis Handlen's leadership.
I really believe the Australian industry is about to go through an exciting new era. We're right in that now. We're right in that eye of change now.
But behind the glossy facade, a mutiny was brewing.
Were things pretty bad by that stage?
Absolutely a crisis point. It's one of those situations that if you didn't fight in the trenches of World War I, you didn't know what it was like. If you didn't work in Sony Music, you had no idea what it was like. People thought they knew. They knew that he was aggressive and a bully and a very, very hard taskmaster, but they didn't have any idea. They just thought it was a typical, I guess, hard boss situation, but it went far beyond that.
There had been multiple times through the 90s where I had told executives in New York what was happening about the drinking, the bullying and the whole thing in the previous 3 or 4 years, and nothing happened from that.
In June 1998, Sony's head office finally paid attention when an executive brought over from the US reported Handlen's behaviour. Alan Terry received a phone call from New York.
He said, "Alan, what's it like working for Dennis Handlen?" And I said, "I'll give it to you in 2 words, utterly miserable."
Greg Lockhart says he was asked to write a report for Sony's international president. It was co-authored by 3 other executives, including Alan Terry.
And we all sat down and basically presented a report that we wanted to be, above all, accurate. It was a 9-page document that was rather telling to anyone who reads it.
There isn't one executive I know that I've worked with at Sony Music Australia that wouldn't come out and support that document 100%. It cannot be challenged. You know, there are too many people that know too much.
The report obtained by Four Corners contained damning allegations.
He is abusive daily, goes into frequent mad rages of screaming and bullying, constantly humiliates staff in meetings, enjoys intimidating staff, cannot treat women as equals, purposely sets out to destroy people for power.
Do you stand by those allegations?
100%. Yes, that's exactly right. The power thing, in the end, we felt we never worked for Sony Music in the end. You work for Dennis Handlen.
The report revealed an annual staff turnover of up to 50%, partly because of Handlen's extraordinary habit of firing people for seemingly arbitrary reasons.
Has instructed me to terminate people for 1, not smiling at him, 2, not saying hello, 3, not liking the physical look of someone, 4, totally misreading or misinterpreting comments by employees, and 5, for being pregnant.
What would have happened if you'd said no, Dennis?
Well, I would have been gone.
He would have sacked you.
That's my opinion.
2 pages of the report were dedicated to concerns about Handlen's drinking habits and the impact it was having on the company.
Highly abusive and aggressive to Sony staff and others when he's drunk. Senior managers who are forced by Dennis to stay out regularly till 4 or 5 a.m.
But perhaps the most shocking allegation of all was detailed by Greg Lockhart on the final page.
Such is the level of Dennis's obsession with total control that I have been instructed on a dozen different occasions to have personnel followed by private detectives.
That just seems unfathomable that a CEO would want his own staff followed by private detectives. How did it feel to be carrying out that demand?
Oh, terrible. Terrible. And I welcomed the opportunity to actually tell New York. It was just the sheer fact that he actually requested such an event to happen that horrified me. You know, who says, I run a company, I don't trust this person, I'm going to get them followed to see what they're doing. Well, I've never heard of it before, and I hope I never hear of it again.
Initially, Sony's head office appeared to take the issue seriously. Dennis Handlin was suspended. An investigation was launched with 10 Australian executives flown to New York for interviews.
It was amazing because sitting in that room with me were two executives that I had discussed over the last 3 or 4 years, exactly what we were discussing in that room. Yet not one of them spoke up and said, well, actually, Greg did tell us.
Phil Barter was the financial controller and was asked to compile a special brief on Handlin's use of company funds.
I was asked about misuse of company funds and to report on examples of where Dennis may have used company funds for personal benefit rather than corporate benefit.
Phil Barter says he provided evidence of a dozen different occasions when Handlin had allegedly spent company money on personal expenses, including up to $15,000 on his school reunion in Brisbane.
There was 3 business class airfares for Dennis, his wife and the chauffeur. There was a limousine hire for a car to use for the day. There was an artist was paid, a well-known Australian Sony Music artist performed. To me, there was no question about could that be perceived as something for the benefit of the company. It should have been a personal expense.
The list also detailed an allegation that Dennis Handlin had spent company money at brothels.
I think we probably expected that he would be sacked. With such a weight of criticism and ammunition against him, no one would expect to keep them.
Publicly, Handlin spun his suspension as medical leave due to his punishing work ethic and lashed out at ridiculous rumours. He's quoted in a September 1998 article saying, "Had I done anything dishonest, I'd have been fired by now. Companies like this don't fuck around."
We were getting all the assurances from New York, indirectly in my case, but through the HR manager at the time, director at the time, was he's not coming back.
But 3 months into Dennis Handlin's suspension, a decision was handed down that shocked staff. Their CEO was returning.
And that was a constant theme. He's not coming back, he's not coming back, and then suddenly he's coming back. And I remember the disbelief after all that had happened that this was happening, that he was coming back. And it was just total disbelief.
Well, they certainly knew of his issues, but we had been performing well. But we made a lot of money, made our budgets, and I think on that scoreboard alone, they thought, well, he's doing a good enough job.
Fearing a mass walkout, Sony offered 15 senior employees cash incentives to stay, totalling $750,000.
I was furious. I was insulted, to be honest. I accepted it, and was paid it, but my first reaction was I was insulted. It was almost like an admission that we're doing the wrong thing, but we're going to do it anyway.
For Alan Terry, it was the trigger to walk away.
I knew my health was suffering. I knew that it just wasn't acceptable to me that the intrusiveness into my life would continue any longer. No amount of money could have enticed me to go back. And I just had this overwhelming relief when I finally left the company that I was in charge of my life again.
Nine of the 10 executives involved left Sony Music Australia within the next 4 years. Dennis Handlin emerged more powerful than ever, not only within the company, but now as the chairman of the ARIA board.
He'd gone through this typhoon and came out the other side, survived out the other way, so I think he must have felt he was untouchable.
Handlin's reign at Sony would continue for another 2 decades, and many more people would suffer.
I was pretty well used and thrown out. Not only by Dennis, by Sony Music itself.
Shane Earl worked as Dennis Handlin's private chauffeur for 4 years.
As far as I was concerned, I was his servant. I was there for him to serve him, and I thought I was doing the right thing. But I hung him for too long. I got torn to pieces.
Inside Handlin's company car, Shane Earl says he endured constant verbal and psychological abuse.
It'd be a hit and then a retraction, another hit and a retraction. The problem was, as time went by, the hits became much closer together. All I was trying to do was do my job, and I felt targeted, I felt manipulated, and I certainly felt abused.
Shane kept diaries between 1998 and 2001, documenting Dennis's escalating demands, which included him working up to 90-hour weeks and copping constant aggression.
Serious problems with Dennis. Humiliates me in front of other driver. Dennis is looking to attack someone. I will have to maintain a pleasant disposition to keep him off me.
There's only so much you can put up with. It might be just driving a car, but you're trying to keep someone who's reasonably unhinged, to keep them on track. Not easy.
In one instance, Shane picked up Handlin after a late-night drinking session in Sydney's CBD.
He had a little regular stop, which was Harry's Cafe de Wheels, a place where you buy a meat pie down near the naval base. And a lot of people frequent it, especially early hours in the morning.
Handlin asked Shane for cash to buy a pie.
No, Dennis, I don't have any money. Do you have any money? Because I don't. All I got was F you, F you, F you, screaming at the top of his voice. Just acting like a child, because he didn't get his meat pie.
Shane says the abuse escalated on the drive home.
It was relentless. I increased speed on the harbour bridge, and I kept increasing my speed because I just wanted him out. I was having so much trouble processing the yelling and the screaming, and also trying to drive. Got into the suburbs, and he threw a phone at my head. So I stopped the car. I got out. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm leaving you." So I grabbed my gear and I walked away.
When Shane was fired in March 2001, he says he tried to tell Sony's New York head office about the abusive behaviour. He was paid out, but once again, nothing was done about Handlin.
When my tenure was over, I thought I had an opportunity to let New York know that the beast was back, because that's all I can describe him as. The first time, their warning was from the 10 executives. The second time was me, one small individual calling out and saying, hey, you do have a serious problem here. So if the attitude was, he's just a small guy, he's just a driver, we can make this go away.
Okie dokie, the highest selling Australian album. The aria goes to Innocent Eyes, Delta Goodrum.
As head of Sony Music Australia and chairman of the ARIA board, Dennis Handlin wielded immense power. Publicly, he championed young female artists like Delta Goodrum.
Oh goodness, thank you so very much. To my wonderful record company, Dennis Handlin for Sony Music when I was 15 years old, and your passion for music and your love for life, and me as a person, thank you so much. Yeah, I love you dearly.
But behind the scenes, Sony's female employees were being treated very differently.
I would say it was a very difficult place to be a female. The laddish language, the objectification was accepted in that environment. I think I only saw on one case that really sort of offended my values, where I was standing with Dennis and he started making sexual comments about an employee I just hired, breasts, physique, those sort of things. I mean, I would call it locker room chat.
Matthew McQuaid says Dennis Handlin's attitudes towards women had a profound impact on the company culture.
I felt because of the position of power, it allowed people who wanted to have that laddish view of life the free rein to do it. And there were no consequences for doing it, because ultimately one person held all the power. He set the tone.
It was so common that the male executives would comment and leer at these women to their face, making comments about their bodies right out in the open, you know, making leering comments about their breasts or any part of their bodies, like they were just an object or a piece of meat. And it was completely it was just par for the course.
Irene Saunders was the National Promotions and Publicity Manager at Sony for 6 years. She says the discrimination was most glaring when female employees fell pregnant.
I started to notice that as women would go off to have a child and be on maternity leave, that they just wouldn't come back. And then it became like an open secret that if you had a child at Sony, you'd be made redundant on maternity leave. People just used to joke, like, wow, how have you got kids at Sony? Haven't they gotten rid of you yet?
Irene was forced out after taking maternity leave to have her third child.
So I was, a few months off coming back when I just got a phone call to come in for a meeting. And I thought, oh, here it is. And I was told that, well, first of all, they expressed concerns that the type of job it is, going to gigs and, long hours and so on, that's going to be tough to do with 3 kids, isn't it? And I thought to myself, Dennis has 6 kids. Would you ask a man that? But then they said, well, it looks like there's going to be a big restructure. There may not be a role for you, so you're going to be better off jumping first before you're pushed.
We've confirmed at least 7 women were made redundant while on maternity leave over a 6-year period, up to 2013. They were all paid cash settlements.
It sounds like Sony's done a pretty good job of silencing women over the years.
A remarkable job. I mean, it's always been a massive story that has been waiting to come out. And it would never come out while Dennis was still at the helm because people were so scared.
there would usually be a clause in there to say that the terms of the termination couldn't be discussed once the monetary payment was received.
Did it feel like gag money?
It was exactly gag money.
Tamara Georgopoulos worked at Sony Music from 2011 to 2015. At first, she enjoyed the lavish parties and VIP events.
Often we pinch ourselves and think we get to do this for a job. This is incredible. So many people would kill for a job like this.
But she soon realised it could be an awful place to be a young woman.
The executives would get very, very drunk to the point of slurring their speech, grabbing you, pulling you in for hugs, touching your body. I began to dread these events. I didn't enjoy them anymore. Sometimes it felt as though we were there at events or in the office to kind of be preyed upon and to not be taken seriously in our careers. And that's how I felt after being sexually harassed and being grabbed by executive men.
Tamara says attractive junior female employees were often exclusively invited to party with senior male managers, including visiting executives from Sony New York.
I don't think that they can be over in the US and pretend that they didn't know this was happening. The US executives would often be at these events with alcohol, with young girls very intoxicated. They had been at these events that I had been at, and they had seen this behaviour. So they are fully aware, and they are responsible. They were negligent, and they let this happen. And they let this happen for decades.
Four Corners can reveal Dennis Handlin allowed 2 alleged perpetrators of sexual misconduct to remain at the company despite formal complaints against them. In one incident in 2016, a female employee alleged that during a work event at the Sony office, a naked male manager confronted her in a bathroom and sexually assaulted her. The woman reported it directly to Dennis Handlin and HR. Sony Music wrote to the woman,
"Some of the conduct that's come to light and been confirmed is totally unacceptable to the company. This has been very clearly communicated by Dennis, who said unequivocally that such behaviour must never occur again. There should be no doubt that these events will have serious career ramifications at Sony Music."
Despite this, the alleged perpetrator continued on in a senior role at Sony for several more years. The female employee left the company with an $80,000 payout and a non-disclosure agreement.
Everyone in the music industry knows about Sony Music. It's widely known what kind of culture they foster and cultivate, and everyone's just swept it under the rug.
Over the past 37 years, the industry and Sony Music have endlessly rewarded Dennis Handlin. In 2014, he celebrated his 30th anniversary as CEO, and the company threw him a gala ball. A-list celebrities lined up to congratulate him.
30 years, congratulations.
We like you a lot.
You've supported my music.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Slash here.
Dennis, you are one of the best.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis Handlin.
On with the show, and while the
Whether he was successful or not, I don't think we can condone, if we are going to call it success, the way the success was achieved. That's not acceptable anymore. No one is untouchable.
Tell me now. Tell me now.
It's very clear that in Sony Music Australia there was a culture of hiding things and getting rid of the people who spoke up about it rather than trying to attack the problem.
Okay, roll camera. Everyone stand. Show me your final looks. No blinking. And playback.
In
In 2020, the Australian music industry experienced its own Me Too moment, when independent artist Dina Lynch, who performs as Jaguar Jones, started speaking out about her experience of sexual assault.
I wanted people to know that they weren't alone, and I think I just wanted to fuel the fire that was already starting to burn. It's just been such a long time of hiding and hiding and hiding that it just took one little thread to unravel it all in the end.
Her campaign led to a flood of online allegations of sexual assault, abuse of power and bullying at major record labels. Many of the complaints posted on social media were about Sony Music.
And as soon as I read them, I actually felt sick. And then I felt really angry that it was still going on and that it was still young, predominantly young women or junior staff who were bearing the brunt, and they were the ones who had to speak out.
I don't know what it's looking like. I think it created so much heat that Sony had one choice, which was, are they going to do something about it or are they going to take on the heat directly? They really had no choice anymore.
As the heat turned up on Sony, Dennis Handlin had to do something. So he sacked his vice president, Tony Glover, a company veteran of 17 years.
No, I didn't.
Who was facing complaints from female employees. You've been accused of bullying, harassment and inappropriate touching. What do you say to that?
Well, I was not ever aware that that was a thing with me during my career at Sony Music. It was never made aware to me at any time until I was served with a document in February this year.
You've been described to me as a compulsive groper. What do you make of that?
It shocks me. You can probably tell by the look on my face that I have no knowledge of that, and I don't know why someone would say that. If that's what they think, I apologise.
What is it that drives you to sit here today and speak publicly about what's happened?
You know, there was certain social media sites that were bringing their heat towards record companies, and certainly our record company. And in my mind, I think someone had to pay for that. And
so are you saying you're a scapegoat?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, you know, the thinking was the heat's coming, we need to do something about this. What's the best way to deal with it? Let's take out a senior exec. Look, we fixed the problem and nothing to see here, move on.
Tony Glover's scalp wasn't enough to save Dennis Handlin. On June 21, he was sacked. No explanation was given by the company except that it was time for a change. 3 other executives have also since left.
Shouldn't they let people know why Dennis Handlin isn't working for the company anymore? The official statement says that they agreed that it was time for a change of management, but no one is satisfied with that comment. Nobody. Not people who work there, not people who have left. People want to know that Sony Music, New York, has taken the correct action to dismiss an employee for the reasons he's been dismissed for.
Dennis Handlin declined to be interviewed by Four Corners, but in a statement said,
I would never tolerate treating women in an inappropriate or discriminatory manner. At any time I was made aware of this sort of behaviour, I took action to ensure that it was stopped and didn't occur again. Over the years, this included seeing people at all levels leave the company. With issues of sexual misconduct, I always took immediate action. This included commissioning independent inquiries.
Sony Music said in a statement it takes bullying, harassment and other inappropriate behaviour very seriously, and the allegations it's investigating have only recently come to light. The words ring hollow for those who worked there.
I can't help but be really disappointed in the people that kept that man in that position. After knowing about this behaviour for decades, they were warned about this and they kept that man there. And now there are so many more people that have been hurt and have their careers ruined, and so many women that have left the industry altogether because they just chose to look the other way.
It's Sony Music internationally needs to be questioned as to how this could ever occur. Yeah, he's been removed from his position. Yeah, they're lying on the ground, waiting for dust to settle. But it can't be like that. It's got to go out there so that this can't occur again.
These people were traumatised. And until they see New York stand up and have the guts to come out and face the music on this, which is what everyone's expecting, this story is not going to go away.